aka trans guy drag queen Debbie Penetration. Put your hands together for Sweet Gwendolyn. Get on up here.
Hey. So, this is the third memorial performance I have done in 4 months, and hopefully will be the last one for a very long time. When I was here 2 months ago, I told you about my cool, older, and accepting metalhead cousin Chris, and how he cultivated this budding young drag queen mind with his love of theater metal and glam rock. And in September, in Bridget Bandit's show, I performed a tribute piece for Teresa Nervosa, who was one of the drummers for the Butthole Surfers and poster child for the movie Slacker. So tonight, I am here to talk about another death in the extended Butthole Surfers family, someone who was also a nationally prominent member of the queer community and was a huge power broker in the national rock scene for decades. His name was Craig Stewart, and he was husband to King Coffee of the Butthole Surfers. He worked as a booker for South by Southwest for 20 years, retiring as showcase manager. He ran his own record label, which was Emperor Jones, which featured such acts as Rocky Erickson, Stickmen with Ray Guns, ST-37, and the Crack Pipes. He worked at the highly influential record label Trance Syndicate, which was run by his husband King, which, with its iconic Hydra logo, launched many Texas bands into the national scene in the 1990s, including Ed Hall, the Pain Teens, 16 to Lust, Crust, and the Cherubs. And on a personal note, as much as the Butthole Surfers are very much the how and the why, I wound up moving to Austin in 2004. Getting to live in the same city as the Cherubs was a solid second place motivating factor for me moving here. And I feel nothing but unmitigated gratitude to Craig and King for having introduced me to their music, because the only way I can put it is that for me, listening to the Cherubs is such unmitigated bliss, it feels like my ears are jizzing. In 2014, Craig was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, which is a degenerative terminal illness, and 3 to 4 years ago, I ran into King and told him that I had a great story about Craig, and he asked me if I would type it up and email it to him, so I'm going to read it now. So, this is the story about how something Craig said had such an incredibly positive effect on me years ago. I always liked him, but it is the reason that he has had a very special place in my heart all of this time, and sums up how sometimes small gestures can have a huge impact on someone's life. It was backstage after the show the Butthole Surfers played at the New Emos just before it was fully open on Riverside. When I made it backstage after the show, Craig was already surrounded by a thick crowd of hangers-on, all wanting a piece of him, and when he saw me, he loudly called out, as much for my benefit as a big fuck you to everyone around him he did not want to be dealing with, "Finally, someone I actually want to talk to." Such a minor thing, but I had a very low opinion of myself at the time. I had suffered a lot of abuse and violence over my life and never felt like I belonged in either the straight or queer world. I felt especially rejected by the queer world and semi-accepted, but totally different from everyone around me in the straight rock and roll one. I was frequently backstage at shows back then, both big and small, but often felt generally looked down upon in the social dynamic as someone being perceived as female and therefore as window dressing backstage after a show. We were seen as unimportant at best and just a sum of our function of being chicks after a show, often at worst. While people were usually generally glad to see me, that was the first time that anyone of any prominence had ever been so completely and loudly, "Fuck yeah, Gwendolyn's here!" So it was especially nice coming from a fellow queer person when gay men were literally the ones who had chased me from the queer scene to begin with, which had had a very destructive impact on me as a young gay trans man. I know that the incident doesn't really sound like much writing it out, but I can't really emphasize how little value I ascribed to myself at the time and how despised by gay men I generally felt, and it was just nice to be very loudly valued by him for all to see and hear. I still don't know why he felt that way, but my guess was that it was a cross between finally seeing another queer person in the crowd and also the fact that I was about the only person in the room who didn't want something from him, which is true. I genuinely just really liked him. We chatted for a long while and it was nice. So that is how a single sentence impacted my young queer life. It instilled in me that maybe I really did deserve to be hanging out with high-profile movers and shakers, and maybe other queer men could actually really value and like me. And I'd even go so far as to say that that specific incident gave me a shove into becoming a high-profile mover and shaker myself, parentheses, among other gigs and accomplishments. I'm currently up for a Best of Austin award at the moment, but that is its own story. To end this by tying it into tonight's theme of triumph, at a time when extreme homophobia was the norm in the music industry, for Craig to not only rise through the ranks with so much stacked up against him, but to also become one of the more important people in the rock, and especially the noise rock industry, was huge. And being an out gay man power broker in the music world, who the homophobes had to learn to be nice to, and who was also able to help his queer family and the industry along the way, were huge triumphs as well. But far more specifically, when I first learned of his diagnosis, I instantly remembered something that Craig had written on the Butthole Surfer's message board in 2007, long before gay marriage was available in most of the country. Never one to mince words, Craig wrote, "Me as an alcoholic, overweight faggot means that I'll die before my healthy boyfriend of 20 years, yet all the fucking money I've put into Social Security will just stay with the feds, not going to him." I'm happy to say that Craig and King were able to get married in New Mexico in 2014, just months after Craig's diagnosis. And in a world where queer couples were denied hospital visitations with their dying partners, excluded from end-of-life decision-making, and were cheated out of inheritance and retirement benefits, King was able to have full visitation rights and medical decision-making rights. And when King turned 60, rather than the feds keeping all of Craig's money, the same way that they stole retirement income from generations of queer families, his devoted husband and caretaker, King, will in fact start receiving payments from Craig's Social Security retirement account, Craig Stewart's final triumph.